Hi everyone, and here we are in the burial query video. So what is a query and why might you want one? First of all, a query is as simple as asking your database a question. You've spent years pumping information into your database and you want to get that out. You maybe remember a name from years and years gone by, and suddenly the name pops up again and you think, where was that, and is that in my database somewhere? Well, you want to find that quickly, and that's already built in Queries and Family Historian, and there's also facilities in Rootsmagic for doing that search across the whole database. I'm going to show you how to build that burial query step by step using a particular example in Belfast. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding results, subtracting results, and keeping that up until we get exactly the results we need. Firstly, a very well-known acronym which applies to any data collection system and queries. GIGO. Garbage in, garbage out. If your data is all over the place, sometimes in notes, sometimes in description fields, and maybe even in place fields, then it's going to be difficult to query that data. But don't worry, we all started somewhere with the limitations of the program of that time. Family Historian, more than any other genealogy program I have ever used, will help you find, report and correct those bad habits of the past. For me, this one's all about tracking down burials, discovering whether headstones exist, photographing them, adding them as media so that we can add detail to our narrative reports and database. I also want to know if I've visited a gravesite and the burial photo is simply not available, so I'll capture that all in my project and database. For my Rootsmagic subscribers, I have to inform you this type of media query is not possible, even in the latest version 9.03. It's long been requested and usually comes up on the forums every Memorial Day, but it's just never been implemented. I will work a little Rootsmagic video in just to show what is possible in Rootsmagic, so if you want to catch that, remember to subscribe down below and you'll get an email notification. Accessibility is always a big issue in genealogy software. Some of us have better eyes than others. So the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to turn this up to 120%, and I do that by going to Tools, Preferences, Display, and here's the scaling. Now, although 100% is the lowest here, I can actually put 85 in there. And apply. You can put a lot more on screen, but you do have to have good eyesight. So let's go back to 120% just to make it visible for everybody. And hopefully everybody can see that. So firstly, built-in queries. If you click the Find button here on the top, this opens this dialog. You can uncheck different things here. I came across a surname many years ago in death notices, and the surname was Scar. And recently I have seen that mentioned somewhere else. I didn't add people to my database back then, but it's certainly in the notes of some facts where that name Scar is mentioned. I'm going to scan my whole database and I'm going to find that. I have just over 46,000 entries in this test database. Here's the results set, and you can see there's some scars here that I had forgotten about. Now this window can be resized, and my first FYI to the developers of Family Historian is it'd be nice if it would stay with my preference so that next time I come in here I don't have to do that. So that's one note for diary. These entries, if I go quickly to this note and go down here, here's the scar that I was looking for. It was in death notices back in the 1950s. I still have to find out exactly who that family is. Their marriage was maybe abroad, but I'll discover that in the future. I can also take these results out and display them in the results window. Here's the 4 columns here for building your queries. So this will become more familiar as time goes on. So that method was behind the binoculars. Another method is to go to Query, Miscellaneous, Contains Text, and look for the same text. This actually runs a lot quicker. It only brings up the individual, and that's because when you go back to the columns here, this is the only column that's included. If I wanted to add, for example, let's just change birth, we'll choose date, You see, Family Historian warns me that this is a standard query and it's not editable. Do you wish to do that? I say yes. I'm going to save this as contains text. So this is now a custom query. So go back, event, birth, date. I can add that and now run it again. And you can see we now have 2 columns. So that's how you start to create a custom query. So that's 2 methods for finding contains text. So we've seen how there are standard queries. If we go to query, they're all listed under subtitles here. We can go down through them, DNA, facts, events, and you can load any of these and then modify it the way I've just shown you. Our custom queries are down here, and if I click on that, the only one that exists at this point in time is the one that I just showed you being saved. So now we're going to go and build our own query. So I'm going to click on query, and I'm going to click on new custom query. I'm going to give it a name, burial photo missing. It's an individual query, and when you progress into queries, you can do a fact, family, individual, media, note, place, repository. This is an individual query. And it's an individual query because we're looking for a list of individuals who have a burial photo missing. This is the first window you'll be presented with. The custom query already has a name. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a description. This is my query. I want to list all the people with a burial event. We don't have a burial photo. And here's a little note for myself. I'm only testing this out. I have some problems if I could only spell some. The title, this is all print related. Don't forget, Family Historian has context sensitive help. So I'm just going to press the F1 button. And here we are in the query window. I'm going to shoot down here, and on the general tab, I do this. All of the print options, the title, the subtitle, orientation, and multi-page handling are all dealt with here. I'm now going to look at this bottom one, which is the grouping. So in here, I want to add this to a group. I don't have anything relating to burials or deaths, so I'm going to add new. So I'm going to go for deaths and burials. Any of my new death and burial related queries, I can stick them into this group. Okay, now that we have done that, if we hit the query button, you can see that deaths and burials is here as a new group, and here's our burial photo missing query. So that's us finished with this first tab. And go to the second tab. So here what we're going to do is set out the actual report layout. At the moment we can see that individual is selected, so I want to add several additional sort of columns to our report. If I just run this query now, I get everyone in the database. So we need to make adjustments to that. So the first thing I want is burial, and I'm going to have the date. You can see when you open each of these up, there's various options for date. I normally use a Brave 4, which gives me year only, and I'm going to flick that over just using the arrow key. I can pick from any of these options. If I just wanted the date in full, I can just move that over like this. I'm going to remove that again. Now I add cemetery details in the address field. A lot of Family Historian users don't do that, but I like to have cemetery address details different from the main place detail. If I move down slightly, I can see everything else here associated with burial. So I'm going to go for address, and I'm just going to click address and move it over. The next thing I want is the place. So I have the cemetery and the place. Now I'm really not sure if doing this for the first time, are these fields that I'm selecting going to give me the results that I want? Let me just run the report again. So we will have burial date, a Brave 4. Let me sort on that. Let's sort it ascending. In Family Historian, to sort the opposite way to the default, hold down the Alt key and click the header. So here we have all our burial events in reverse date order. Let me stretch these out a little bit. And you'll see as we move down them, there's a lot of people here that don't have burial dates at all. We're going to filter those out later in the query. We can see the burial address works. We can see the burial place works. So all of those fields are successful. Let's go back to our columns. As I now want to show you how to change this heading. This heading's a wee bit verbose, so let's change this. Go to burial date, and here's the heading that appears on your report. I'm going to change that to burial year and click update. Actually, since I'm working a lot in the bottom lower half of the screen here with the expressions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink the screen a little bit at the bottom, because that's where YouTube normally put the captions. This is our expression. You don't need to understand that. Family Historian puts that in for you. And there are many custom expressions that you'll discover through the Family Historian user group on the web. So it's looking at Indy, bury, one. Well, most of us only have one burial event, the date, and it's presenting it as abbreviated for. I can tell it which way I would like to sort that, and I can set that out for each expression. Over here, you have a little arrow, and under that arrow, I'm going to put, you've got a choice of description in box, data reference in box, or show both. I'm going to put show both. So in the case of our burial, it's telling me the event of the proper disposing of mortal remains of a deceased person. And if we go down into date and abbreviated for, let's see what it says. Dates are displayed in an abbreviated format similar to abbrev 3, except that only years are shown. And here's the expression. And that's exactly what we have over here. The next thing I really need to add is media. So in this case, to add the media, what I want to do is go to Events, Burial, go down to Media, and first of all we'll add media record, and secondly, when we go into multimedia record, we will add file. Let's again check our results. So we can see here we have burial photograph with a file link, and we have the path. I think we have the columns that we need on this report now. I can reorder these if I wish. So if I want burial place to be higher up, I can use the arrow keys here to move it up or move it down. And that all affects our report output. So we're happy with that. Let's move to the third tab. On this tab, this is where you set up what you want in your report and what you want to exclude from your report. If your first condition is add if, in other words, an addition, Family Historian presumes your result set to be completely empty. If your first condition is exclude if, Family Historian will start with the assumption the result set is completely full. Before we do that, let's run it with no conditions. That's going to give you a full result set of your complete database. So we have everybody in here whether they have a burial record or not. We don't want that. So what's the first thing we can do? I think the first thing we'll do is we'll add only those records that have a burial address. So let's go to our rows, add if, click the drop down, burial address contains. Now you don't have to put in anything for contains, and I'm going to add that criteria, and it adds here. So let's see what our result set looks like now. All we have is records where the burial address is actually populated. So that's a good start. So we can see here that I have city cemeteries here. I'm not going to sort these, but I have city cemeteries here, city cemeteries here. That's the cemetery in Belfast that I'm going to focus on. So what I want to do is I want to go back to my rows, and I'm going to say exclude unless, and I'm leaving the address, and I'm saying contains city. Add. So we have two criteria now. Add if the address contains anything, and exclude unless The burial address contains city. Let's try that. Now we have all of our city cemetery burial effects. Very good. Now, if I look at these, and it's all in the way that I recorded data, and remember what I said earlier on about garbage in, garbage out. Where I have city cemetery XX, for me, that is code basically for I've still to discover the plot number. Where I have city cemetery hash, that tells me I do know the plot number. So the petrol gauge has gone down slightly at this point. First thing is, if the address contains XX, I don't know the plot, so I certainly can't identify a photograph. So let me go back to my rows. I'm going to exclude if address contains, and I'm going to put in XX. And that will take all of those out of the result set. I'm going to add, and now we have 3 criteria. Let's run it again. All of the XX's have now gone from my list. The next thing I can exclude is these ones that say public ground. Public ground were almost like paupers' graves, so the grave wasn't owned by a particular family and therefore it didn't have family related burials in it, so I can exclude those. Exclude if contains public. I'm going to add that to my list. That's the 4th criteria here, and let's run again. Now we've got rid of all of the public ground entries. What I'm left with is a list of the plots where I can see I actually have plot numbers. I can see here on this column that some of these have burial photographs, some of them don't. So the next thing I want to do is I want to exclude anything that has a burial photograph already attached. I only want those that we need to discover burial photographs for. So exclude if the object, which is that column, contains, and we don't actually need to say what it contains. In other words, leaving this blank if it contains anything. And we're going to add that, and we're going to run the result. Now we have a list of all burials in the city cemetery where I have a plot number, so I can walk to the plot, but I don't have a media record. And that's exactly what I want. What I don't want to do is I don't want to have to go into my query every single time and tell it what the cemetery name is or what value to look for. So let me strip that out, and I'm going to change this to parameter. The label is going to be partial cemetery name, and the type is going to be text. I'm going to update that, and now you can see the query here has been updated. So let's try to run it this time. So I get a prompt. It's asking me for a partial cemetery name. I type city, and there's the same result set for the city cemetery. But the beauty about what we've done now is if I type that again, and I type Dundon, that's for Dundonald Cemetery. What I've noticed about Dundonald Cemetery is I have a lot of plots here where I don't have the plot name. The plot name is always, the way I enter it, it always has a hash. So I need to exclude those that don't have the hash. Again, let me go back. I'm going to exclude unless the address contains hash. Add, and that's our final one. We can reorder these. The logic has to work from top to bottom, but I'm pretty sure this will work as it is. So let's do Dundonald again. And now we only have a record set of burials in Dundonald where we do have a plot number and we don't have a burial photograph. Now I have a number of options here. The likes of this here I can just copy, Control C, and I can go to Excel and I can just paste, Control V. And if you use Google Docs or whatever, you have all that information immediately available. What I'm going to do and what works best for me is I'm going to save the result set as a PDF file. And I'm going to save that in my Dropbox folder. So burial photo missing, I'd probably add in there Donald, and I'm going to save that. And if you use Dropbox, you should have it installed on your PC so that you have local folders on your PC and you can work with them rather than Dropbox itself. I'm going to save. Do you wish the view to... Let's have a wee look. And here's my file that I've just created, and it's in my Dropbox folder. So when I go off to Dundonald Cemetery with my telephone, I can quickly open that up in Dropbox, and I can work my way down through. What we really should have done was sort this before we saved it off, but it's still there. I'll work down through these and make sure to collect burial photographs wherever they're available. The last thing you want to do is you want to go off to the cogwheel here. Let's look at the other options that we do have. I could add all these records to a named list, and that will allow me to create a new named list. I can remove those row records from a named list. In Rootsmagic, these are called named groups. I can set flags on all of the records. I can clear flags on all of the records. I can run and invert the results set. Now, what's that going to do? If I run that and invert it, I'm going to get everybody except those 24 people that are on my list here. I created this query with sequential thinking and experimentation. Any logical thinker will see the query could easily be shortened. I want to cover off some of the other options that make this basic introduction complete. Going back to the rows tab, these two conditions, burial address contains XX and burial address contains public, these two exclusions are negated by the India address contains the octothorpe, which is the big word for the hash symbol. I can right click on these and disable them. You can see they both go grayed out now. Everything else is the same, and if I run this query, I get a warning that it's got one or more disabled rows. Continue anyway. I say yes. We're going to run that for city. And here's our found set. And you can see when you look down, none of these have public ground and none of these have XX. What I could do now is go back to my rows selection. I can enable these by right clicking and selecting enable. You might do this disable and enable if you're trying to resolve a query and find a little problem within it. I know these aren't needed anymore, so what I can do is just delete them. The records in our results set, which is what we've found, you can always find here bottom right, records and results set 139. Another common ask we find in Rootsmagic forums is regards parentage. Parentage can't be searched on or reported, and it's been long asked for. We can see here from this user asking exactly that question. So let's expand on that. So far I've demonstrated to you in the rows using the drop down. These are actually fields that you have on the column setup. Whatever way you have set your columns up for your report, you can actually click the three dots at the end here. So I'm going to do father, name, given, contains John. Exclude unless father's given name contains John. That's exactly what was being asked on the Rootsmagic forum. And I'm going to add that criteria. And now when I run it for city, I only have 8 in the results set. So do all these people have a father of John? I can just double click on that. John Eagleson. If I move up here, there's his father. Let me show you that a different way. Let's take Elizabeth Lavery. I go to the focus window. There's Elizabeth, and there's her father, John. That simple parent criteria there could equally be father's occupation contains blacksmith. Very, very powerful. I haven't really found any limitations in the query possibilities within Family Historian. These two columns for the media record and a media record file were useful when we were building the query, but we don't really need those now. So let me go back to the columns, and I'm going to delete those. Again, down to the X, just delete them. I'm going to add 3 extra columns here just to further demonstrate the powers of Family Historian. The first one is going to be father's name, and this is the expression. I'm going to add that. Secondly, I'm going to add mother, and if I just change that to add that. And the last one I'm going to add is relationship to root. That's the heading, and here's the expression. Now it might be difficult to find that in here, but you'll get a whole list of these in the Family Historian Help, and I'm going to slip these into a text file in the support material for this video. So let me add that. So there's our three. We've got father, mother, relationship to root. Let's run our query again. City, and here's our 8 people. We know the plot numbers. We can sort on those. Here's the father, John Mills, John Gorman. No mothers in this case. But if we look here for Mary Ellen Thompson, you can see that Mary Ellen Thompson was my great aunt, and her parents were Johnston Thompson and Mary Jane Nawn. By the way, relationship calculation, like great aunt here, that's dynamic within Family Historian. You can turn it off if you don't want it to be dynamic, but it doesn't slow the program down. So in Rootsmagic again, which was my previous software, I had to manually sort of invoke a routine to calculate relationships. I couldn't display them on screen in this manner. We can see here another frequently asked question in Rootsmagic forums, and that's regards what they call shared events. They all import into Family Historian faultlessly as witness events. That's just what Family Historian call them. They can't be searched on in Rootsmagic. In Family Historian, it's a standard query. So if I go to query, facts events, witness events, here's all of our witnesses. We can see the name, we can see the event, we can see the role the person had, and we can see the principal. And I can sort on any of those. The first one here is adopted daughter, several aunts, beneficiaries, which are all part of wills, best man at a marriage, several borders. I use this to find nephews and nieces. I would modify this to have parents, and if those nephews and nieces don't have parents currently listed, I would endeavour to search those out and complete my data. I could go on, but I think that's enough for a basic introduction to queries. The possibilities are almost endless within Family Historian. Although I do want to point out, there's my previous query and results set here. These all stack down the left hand side. If I was to go to Mary Ellen Thompson and then go to chart all relatives, here's my chart for Mary Ellen Thompson. You can see all the different highlights, and I can navigate about that as I wish. I've tried to cover all of the basic aspects of queries. That's enough to get you started, enough to give you an overview of all of the possibilities within the query builder. But you're not alone, and if you don't want to build queries, you probably don't have to. If you go to the Family Historian user group knowledge base, there are 139 downloadable queries. The subcategories here: fact, family, individual, multimedia, source. When I first came over from Rootsmagic, I had quite a problem with duplicate facts, and I needed to resolve those. So type in duplicate, and you can see a drop down. You got duplicate spouses, duplicate sources for fact, duplicate place names, duplicate facts, custom IDs, citations, individuals, and media. This is the one I used here. And you can see, run this to find duplicates within your database. I'm going to download that, find duplicate facts. It's downloaded here. Please exercise caution when installing and running plugins. That's okay. If I go back to Family Historian and I go to Tools, Plugins, here's my find duplicate facts here. And if I run that, I don't think I have any. Although this is an old Rootsmagic database, so there may well be some. I tell it what facts I want to run. Find facts. 36 duplicate facts found. And here they are. So you can see the original fact, 60 years, spinster, spinster. As I say, this is an old Rootsmagic database. My data is all fully clean now. But I found that extremely useful when I first migrated to Family Historian. And I'm sure other Rootsmagic users would too, because I see it frequently in the forums being asked for. I'm going to do another short video on some plugins and highlight some of the more powerful ones. Again, you will see this result set is stacked on the sidebar. There's our chart, there's our witness roles, and there's our original query. All very powerful. That's it for now. I'm no expert. If you know any little tricks that I haven't highlighted here, maybe just something I've missed along the way, don't forget to put it in the comments down below and it'll maybe help other users. I'll answer whatever questions I can in the comments section, but don't forget the Family Historian user group. That is where all the experts live. I'll put some of the queries used here into my shared Dropbox folder and you can download them from there. And if you don't see it immediately, click the More button. You'll find the link in there. If you've enjoyed the video, hit the like button to show some support. If you want to get notification of future videos, then hit the subscribe button down below, followed by the bell. I think a cemetery trip's called for now. I'm going to go out and search for some of these burials, see if I can collect some headstone photographs, bring them back to base and get them into my project. I also want to demonstrate a little transcription utility that I've been using when I'm out and about in the field. I found it very useful and it cuts down on a lot of paper, a lot of scribbling, and saves time getting the data into my database. Once I'm finished with this little series, I'll stick them together in a playlist that they play in logical order on YouTube. Thanks again for watching. Off you go, build some queries, do some research, tidy up that data. There's always work to be done in this old hobby of ours.